It started with a 6 a.m. SWAT raid, a former reality TV star in his pajamas, and 2 dogs rescued from a garage. But what looked like a bizarre suburban scandal has just curdled into the most horrific case in Warren County history. New indictments reveal that behind the holiday decorations of this South Lebanon home, a 5-year-old girl was allegedly being systematically drugged and raped, and the woman accused of helping is the person whose job it was to keep patients safe. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. For weeks, the neighborhood of Garden View Circle had lived under a cloud of confused speculation. The initial headlines had focused on the bizarre: the former reality TV star from Neighbors with Benefits, his nurse girlfriend, and the disturbing allegations involving the dogs in their garage. It was a story that felt like a localized tabloid scandal, ugly, strange, and contained. But as the winter of 2026 deepened, the forensic reality of the case curdled into something far more horrific. The investigators who had spent the Christmas holiday processing hard drives and Google Cloud servers finally hit a vein of evidence that paralyzed the room. It wasn't just pandering or animal conduct anymore. The detectives found themselves staring at a digital archive of a child's living nightmare, a diary of abuse that was as clinical as it was depraved. The most chilling revelation to emerge from the February 2026 indictment wasn't just what was happening behind those suburban walls, but the specific methodology of the abuse. This is where the story shifts from a crime of impulse to a crime of professional calculation. Erica Grove wasn't just a registered nurse. She was a nurse anesthetist. In the medical hierarchy, she was the specialist who held the power of consciousness in her hands. She was trained to move patients between the world of the living and the world of the void, ensuring they felt no pain and, crucially, that they remembered nothing of the trauma of surgery. Prosecutors now allege that this professional expertise, honed in operating rooms and military training with the U.S. Army, was weaponized against a child under the age of 6. The prosecution's theory is a descent into a new kind of horror. They allege that the preschooler was systematically drugged to facilitate repeated sexual assaults. This wasn't a crime of impulsive rage. It was a crime of professional precision. By using her knowledge as an anesthetist, Grove allegedly ensured the child remained in a state of chemical compliance. In the medical world, the goal of anesthesia is the triad: unconsciousness, pain relief, and anterograde amnesia. Amnesia is the key here. It is the inability to form new memories while under the influence of specific sedatives. If the charges hold, Erica Grove didn't just participate in the abuse. She designed a wall of silence around it, built out of the very drugs she was entrusted to manage. The prosecution believes she used her professional background to procure or administer substances that would leave the child with no memory of it, as she so casually described the process of being put under to a deputy just weeks prior. The nothingness she discussed with an officer on the day of the raid wasn't a medical abstraction. It was a weapon used to erase the victim's reality. The bodycam footage from the December 23rd raid is now viewed through a much darker lens. We see Erica Grove sitting in the back of a cruiser, behaving like a helpful, polite medical professional. She engages in small talk about anesthesia with a deputy, explaining with clinical detachment how young males often wake up crazy or combative from sedation because of their pediatric brain chemistry. She talks about how she was held down as a 17-year-old getting her tonsils out. At the time, it looked like a side character filling the time with professional anecdotes. Now, it looks like a predator describing her own modus operandi. She was explaining the biology of the brain under chemical control, the very biology she is now accused of manipulating in a child under 6. Every word she spoke to that deputy about the nothingness of anesthesia now sounds like a confession of how she allegedly silenced her victim. While Tony McCollister was in the neighboring car, loudly theatering a medical emergency and claiming his arm was numb, Erica Grove remained calm. She was the calm at the center of a storm she had allegedly helped build. The 24-count indictment against her, including 4 counts of rape and corrupting another with drugs, shattered the early narrative that she was merely a lesser offender who had been caught up in Tony's dark hobbies. The state now views her as a primary actor who provided the medical cover for the atrocities committed. The investigation revealed that the abuse was not just happening, it was being recorded. Warren County Prosecutor David Fornshell described a room full of seasoned investigators falling into a stunned silence while reviewing the evidence. These weren't just still images. They were video files documenting the drugging and raping of a preschooler. This leads to a question that has haunted the community. Why did it take so long? The digital trail leads back to a June 2025 tip from Google, which flagged an account belonging to McCollister through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. The 6-month gap between that tip and the raid is a point of intense scrutiny. While authorities explained that thousands of these tips are processed daily and that most involve passive possession of images, they admitted they didn't know a child was in immediate danger in that house until the warrant was served. During those 6 months of lag, the evidence suggests the abuse continued unabated. Every file uploaded was another digital fingerprint, another hash matched by an AI that eventually brought the SWAT team to their doorstep. The investigators eventually determined that the child sex abuse material, CSAM, wasn't just being traded, it was being produced in that South Lebanon home. The fallout for Erica Grove is absolute. A nurse anesthetist is a position of extreme trust. They are the last line of defense for a patient's safety. To allegedly use that access to bypass medical sign-out systems, which are normally high-security, computer-based lockers for controlled substances, is a betrayal of the entire medical community. Prosecutors are looking into the gaps in the medical systems where Grove worked. They are investigating how she might have obtained the specific drugs used on the child. Every medical environment has a sign-out system, but as the prosecutor noted, every system has gaps. It is believed she took advantage of those gaps to turn a medical specialty into a tool for a horrific crime. The house on Garden View Circle is now a cordoned-off relic of a shattered life. The good boys in the garage have been rescued, and the child is safe with her father. But as the prosecution prepares to present this mountain of digital evidence, Erica Grove's defense is preparing to argue that the woman who understood the science of memory was actually the one whose own memory and will had been suppressed by a more dominant, manipulative monster. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. By February 2026, the case of Tony McCollister and Erica Grove had transcended the local news cycle and entered the realm of a national forensic study. The initial shock of the December raid, the imagery of a reality star in pajamas and the rescue of the target dogs, had been replaced by the cold, hard weight of a 54-count indictment. On February 4th, the courtroom in Warren County became the center of a psychological and legal showdown. Erica Grove was no longer the polite nurse sitting in a cruiser discussing pediatric brain chemistry. She was a defendant facing accusations that could result in her spending the rest of her natural life behind bars. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric with tension as Prosecutor David Fornshell laid out the state's request for bond. Citing the horrific nature of the crimes, which now included 4 counts of rape and the corrupting of a 5-year-old child with drugs, the state asked the judge to set Erica Grove's bail at a staggering $1 million. The prosecution's argument was simple. Grove was a danger to the public, a danger to children, and a danger to animals. They emphasized that the level of sophistication required to allegedly drug a child and record the subsequent abuse suggested a calculated risk to the community that could not be mitigated by standard bond conditions. The prosecution moved to protect the small victim, who was now safe and living with her father. They requested a permanent no-contact order, electronic GPS monitoring, and house arrest should Grove somehow meet the bond. They also asked for a specific order of protection regarding the target dogs and any other animals, ensuring that if Grove walked out of the jail, she would be stepping into a world where her every move was tracked and her contact with any living being was strictly curtailed. However, as the charges were read, Erica Grove's legal team launched a defense strategy that attempted to flip the entire moral architecture of the case. Her attorney did not lead with a denial of the acts depicted in the digital evidence. Instead, he led with a claim of victimhood. Erica is, in fact, a victim here, he told the judge. The defense's primary gambit was coercive control. They argued that Grove's participation in the abuse of the child and the animals was not the result of her own agency, but was born from the manipulative and potentially violent influence of Tony McCollister. The defense painted a picture of a woman whose high-achieving life, an Army officer, a summa cum laude graduate, and a respected nurse anesthetist, had been systematically dismantled by a man who sought the spotlight and pushed the boundaries of human decency. They claimed that during the months-long investigation leading up to the raid, even the detectives had remarked to Grove's parents that Erica seemed largely coerced into her actions. To bolster this puppet narrative, the defense revealed a shocking detail. Erica Grove had allegedly passed a polygraph test regarding the specific allegations of sexual abuse against the girl. By leaning into the polygraph and the coercion angle, the defense was attempting to sow the first seeds of reasonable doubt, suggesting that the woman holding the syringe was doing so under the shadow of a much larger monster. The prosecution was prepared for this. David Fornshell argued that the victim narrative was incompatible with the clinical evidence. He pointed to the repeated raping and the consistent use of drugs over a period of months. In the state's view, you do not coercively drug a child dozens of times. Each time a sedative was procured from a medical environment and administered to a preschooler, it required a series of conscious, deliberate choices. They argued that as a highly trained medical professional, Grove had more resources than almost anyone to escape. She had the financial means, the professional connections, and the tactical training of a soldier. Yet, the state alleged she chose to stay and facilitate the abuse between August 2024 and December 2025. The prosecution's theory remained firm. Grove was the enabler who used her medical expertise to ensure the child was put under so that the crimes could occur without the victim being able to scream or remember. While Grove's team fought the coercion battle, Tony McCollister's defense took a different path. His lawyer argued that Tony was a disabled man on Social Security with no significant criminal record, save for a single phishing violation years prior. They portrayed him as a man with deep ties to the community who was not a flight risk. They suggested he be released on his own recognizance with electronic monitoring. But the judge, Robert Peeler, was looking at a 30-count indictment against McCollister that included 13 counts of pandering child sex, abuse material, and multiple counts of rape. The contrast between the phishing violation and the repeated raping of a preschooler mentioned by the prosecutor was too vast to ignore. The judge rejected the request for a signature bond and instead set bail for both McCollister and Grove at $250,000. While lower than the $1 million request, it carried a strict 10% cash provision, meaning each would need $25,000 in liquid cash to secure their release. The hearing also brought to light the haunting timeline of the investigation. The fact that Google had tipped off the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, in June 2025, but a raid didn't happen until December 2025, remains the most controversial aspect of the case. Authorities defended the lag by explaining the overwhelming volume of tips. Thousands of reports of material are processed daily by a handful of detectives. However, because the initial tip was flagged as possession of material, it didn't trigger the red alert status that occurs when a child is known to be in immediate danger. It wasn't until the warrant was served and the investigators saw the physical reality of the home on Garden View Circle that they realized the material on the server was being produced in real time in the next room. This 6-month window of investigation meant that for half a year, a 5-year-old girl was allegedly being drugged and raped while the digital breadcrumbs sat in a queue. As of today, both Tony McCollister and Erica Grove remain under the intense scrutiny of the Warren County justice system. The 5-year-old victim is safe, beginning the long journey of recovery. The dogs have been permanently removed, and the community of South Lebanon is left with a profound sense of betrayal. This wasn't a crime committed by strangers in the dark. It was allegedly committed by the neighbors with benefits and the nurse who helps people, while the world was distracted by the holidays. The upcoming trial will hinge on the digital evidence. The videos that David Fornshell described as leaving seasoned prosecutors in stunned silence. In Ohio, the rape of a child under 10 is a crime that can result in life without the possibility of parole. For Erica Grove, the woman who understood the science of nothingness, the reality of a life sentence is the only thing left on the horizon. The jury will eventually have to decide. Was she a victim caught in a monster's web? Or was she the clinical predator who provided the sedation that allowed the nightmare to exist in the first place? And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, clarity, and respect for the people affected. If you want to see more fact-based true crime stories like this one, make sure you subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.